All right, I think we'll get going. Want to be mindful of your time. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. I'm Brian Bedoli. I'm the Executive Director of the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency. We had wanted to start a little later tonight just to give people a chance. The one thing we couldn't control, of course, is the lovely weather that we're all having. So if you know of anyone that isn't able to make it, we are going to be recording this session, and it'll be up on our website. So you can reference back, or if you have any other questions as we move forward, and we'll get into that later tonight. But I first just wanted to welcome you all. Really appreciate you coming out. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the work that we've been doing as part of the Ad Hoc Sustainability and Resilience Committee of the Common Council. Our office is serving as staff support for that committee. As part of that work, the first sort of major task was to undertake the development of a sustainability and resilience plan for the city of Norwalk. And to that end, we've engaged with SLR consultants, who you'll be hearing from tonight, in terms of what we've been doing so far, where we're at in the study. A couple key things that I wanted to mention just to kind of frame the context for tonight. One of the large discussion items that occurred at the Sustainability and Resilience Committee was, at what level is the city right now? And, what can we do to sort of best utilize this effort to advance all of the great and existing plans rather than recreating the wheel as part of this effort. So what you'll hear a lot of tonight is really related to the work that this plan is focused on, which is really focused on municipal capacity building. We sort of all recognize that there's been a lot of planning, and I'm sure a number of you have been involved in that planning in the past, that created a lot of projects, whether that's the natural hazard mitigation plan, the plan of conservation and development, and the like, that all had sort of the sustainability focuses, different objectives, different projects for overall resilience. So what we wanted to do is sort of use this effort, of course, to take a fresh look at what was included in those plans, identify any specific gaps that may be missing, that maybe didn't come up in past planning efforts, look for strategies to close those gaps, but I think most importantly, make sure that the city's internal operations are aligned to actually implement those plans. And that's a key focus area of this work that you'll hear tonight. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. So the key focus of tonight, we want to this is our first meeting, our first public outreach meeting. We've done some internal work, looking at some of the existing plans, doing an initial gap analysis, which we're going to be presenting out tonight. So you can just get caught up to where the city is at. But we also wanted to have transparency into the effort so that you know what's going on, and then we could have an open discussion in terms of some things that are on your mind that you think may be missing in other plans, that you think might be something that we should be looking at as part of this as well, either in this engagement or future engagements as we develop our recommendations and move forward with the work of the committee. So really happy that you all were able to make it. I see our numbers are growing here, which is great. So what we'll have first, in terms of the overall structure of the program, is a brief presentation from our consultants, again, catching you up, and then we'll open it up for some sort of guided discussion and dialogue around the topic. So with that, I will kick it over to John from SLR. The floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Brian. Just confirm, Brian, thumbs up. You can hear and see me?
You're good.
And you can see the screen in front of me. Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, Brian. You've teed it up very nicely. We're really excited to be here. And as Brian said, thanks so much to all of you who are giving your time tonight because you're keenly interested and engaged in sustainability and resilience in Norwalk. Again, I'm John Phillips-Bourne. I'm the Climate Resilience Manager at SLR Consulting. SLR is working with our partners, Caramita, another consulting firm, on this. And I'm joined tonight by two of my SLR colleagues, Noah Slovin, our Senior Resilience Planner, and Nina Peak, our Director of US Planning. And they'll be along at the end for supporting Q&A. So a couple housekeeping things. As Brian mentioned, just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. I also wanted to point to you that somewhere on your screen, it's different for everybody sometimes, you should find these icons. And the icon that says Q&A, we would encourage you, if you have questions about this presentation and during this presentation, please put your questions into that box. That's being monitored, and we are going to review and respond to as many questions as we can at the end of this presentation. Brian's going to facilitate that Q&A. There's also, during that Q&A session, you should see this raise hand icon. So if you have an additional question or haven't put anything in but are so inspired, please click on that, and we're monitoring that, and we'll get to your questions then. So Brian did a great job at teeing it up for our welcome. We like to start every presentation to really have some context, and so we're going to start with a couple definitions. And then I'm going to do an overview building off of what Brian said to tell you a bit about the project and its kind of origins and where we are in it. Then we have just wrapped up what I'll tell you more about as phase 1. We're going to share with you a bit about what we've learned during that time, get into project next steps, and then hopefully this is not a very long part because we want to make sure that you have plenty of time for Q&A. And any other comments that you might have. We're also going to have a few polls throughout just to kind of get you thinking about different topics, thinking about why sustainability and resilience in Norwalk is important to you, and get you further excited for additional discussion and questions and answers at the end. And we're keen to hear some of your thoughts. So as I said, I wanted to start with definitions. As Brian mentioned, this is a sustainability and resilience plan. That's two big terms put together, and there are a lot of definitions, increasing amounts of definitions as to what sustainability and resilience mean. And they're different. They're not the same. They're related, but also those differences are important. So we usually bring two definitions that we find and that we like, but we didn't have to do that this time because the City of Norwalk has already defined sustainability and climate change resilience per the city's 2019 to 2029 Plan of Conservation and Development. And those are shown in front of you. So sustainability, for the sake of this plan, and Norwalk, meeting the needs of present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Means conserving resources so they're available in the future, promoting healthy environmental systems and habitats, supporting conditions for continued ecosystem services. Important to note, and then climate change resilience, the ability of a community to adapt and thrive in the face of extreme events and stresses. This means anticipating risks, planning to limit impacts, and implementing adaptation strategies. The city can work on both of these independently. They are, but both are equally important. They're related, and this plan really works to bring forward and bring to light elements of both of these. So neither is necessarily more important than the other. We have a quick poll here just to understand where you're coming from and what's important and exciting to you. Which of the following is a higher priority for you? Sustainability or climate change resilience? Again, no right answer. The poll should be in front of you. We're going to give a few seconds just to have everyone respond or have a chance to, and then we'll move on. Again, no right answer, but just to understand where attendees are really thinking about, what are they concerned most about, what are they most passionate about, what's a higher priority from your perspective. Okay, a few more seconds. People just want to answer. And what I'm seeing is that it's pretty equal, maybe a slight nod towards climate change resilience. That might be because summer has been very, very hot, but there's clearly interest in both. Thanks very much. We'll have a few more of those coming up. So Brian did a great job of teeing up what this project's about. And he also mentioned that the City of Norwalk has not just started thinking about sustainability and resilience, but has been working on it in many different ways for quite some time. We're going to talk a bit more about that. But with that, what's been identified is this great need to bring that together. And so one of the main objectives of this project is really to help coordinate across agencies, so internal city departments, as well as, importantly, with partners. And there are many partners inside and around the city that are working on these initiatives, that are supporting these initiatives. And so how can that work be further coordinated on resilience and sustainability? Another big part of this is to identify gaps. So there's a lot already going on, a lot of great work. Part of our job coming in as a third party, so to speak, has been to understand what's happening and what has been happening, but also where are opportunities, where are gaps that exist. And I'll have a slide to talk more about that as well. Based on what we learn, what we want to do is establish this roadmap, kind of the action guideline, the process to follow for the city at a high level, but also within each department, so that some of these sustainability and resilience actions can actually be taken forward, so that progress can be made and implementation can occur. And part of the way to do that, of course, is to build up municipal capacity. So create the tools and the processes and that administrative capacity so that city staff across departments can help implement some of these sustainability and resilience actions. This is a schematic of what the project actually looks like. So it's been broken down into 3 distinct phases. As I mentioned, we just wrapped up phase 1, which really was the core of that was around this gap analysis. We did a lot of data collection and review of a lot of plans. I'm going to talk more about that. There's a zoning review going on in the city that part of this first phase was to give feedback on. We've had some stakeholder meetings and focus groups, as Brian mentioned, and we created this gap analysis based on those findings. We're pivoting now towards phase 2, taking all of that information, consolidating actions into a more streamlined key list that can be taken forward. We have a detailed workshop that's going to occur with city staff, and we're going to develop the framework, which will turn into the roadmap. Phase 3 is to help with some succinct, specific municipal capacity building, both through training, through helping with crosswalks and understanding which departments work together on different actions, identify that administrative capacity needs, and also work on education and engagement internally. This is an overview of the project as a whole. We'll revisit this at the end before we wrap up. So the key part for tonight is really to share with you all some of the things that we learned during phase 1. So that kind of literature review, data review, and gap analysis. And I think it's important just to acknowledge we at SLR have done a lot of related sustainability and resilience planning, and every city's at a different point. Every city's starting from a different place. We work with a lot of places that aren't very far along in this process, and that's not the case here in Norwalk. As you can see on the screen, we reviewed 15 different plans that have occurred and been developed for and by the city since 2009. And what you'll see here are very different plans or studies or initiatives, none of which are titled Sustainability and Resilience Plan, but all of which have really important factors that contribute to sustainability and resilience. So the first step for us was reviewing these, seeing what's been done, as Brian mentioned, a lot. And we are taking actions from these, and it's informing everything going forward. We also spent some time looking at some of the ongoing studies and plans occurring in the city related to sustainability and resilience. And again, a lot's currently happening. And as I'm sure many of you have seen, there's been some big grant awards to Norwalk to further some of these efforts. So different plans and studies related that are ongoing. How does this plan build from and learn from those, and also feed further information to help synthesize and kind of coalesce the different efforts going on within the city? After doing that literature review, we took a moment to understand what are some key themes that have come up. 15 different plans over some 14, 15 years. What are some themes? What have we learned? What's the city doing? What does the city acknowledge? What is the city acknowledging that they might be missing? This slide here, just to kind of give a precursor, isn't the gap analysis. That's going to be next, so hold on there. So these are both strengths that we identified, but also some areas where it's been acknowledged that additional work's needed. I'm going to go over this at a very high level, but we wanted to share with you some of the key findings. So the top left, these two things are some of the key vulnerabilities that the city's facing. It's been acknowledged that heat is a critical concern across the city. There's even a current effort going on to further understand heat risk. Very timely, of course, given all of the extreme heat that's occurred this summer. So more work to be done there, but this is another example where the city is already getting itself together on what heat means for the city, and that's not occurring everywhere. Coastal flooding is an identified risk, and work is continuing to be done to both understand that, where it is, what it looks like, and how to address it. Stormwater management has dual benefits. It can both reduce runoff, but it also can help protect environmental habitat and key natural resources. There is a lot mentioned throughout numerous plans about the value of green space and the urban tree canopy. Again, the multiple benefits that can come from investing in green space, open space, nature. And so that's a theme that we're hoping to take forward. Certainly emphasis on maintaining and enhancing public waterfront access. And as I mentioned, kind of there's a core theme throughout many of the plans that we heard from both internal staff and especially a lot of partners, this emphasis on the ecological preservation and restoration on some of the unique coastal habitats and ecosystems that are within and surrounding Norwalk. So moving to the top right, there was a lot of acknowledgement through many different plans and discussions about the importance of environmental justice and specific communities and the important implications of environmental justice, specifically within climate change work in Norwalk. There was also the acknowledgement that more is needed to be done in this area. So both a plus that the city is keenly aware, also call to action that more can be done. Emphasis on educating and engaging in the community and with the community about the impacts of climate change. These next two parts are things that the city's doing and increasingly trying to do more of. There's already sustainability and resilience tools and themes within development planning. And also, as I mentioned, there's a zoning update going on, and sustainability and resilience are already included in ways in the zoning policies, but how can it be done even more? Bottom right, greenhouse gas emissions reductions. You'll hear about this in some of my next slides. This is a core acknowledgement that more can be done here, from baseline inventory to pathways to reduce emissions. So there's a clear commitment from the city that this is a needed next step. And then this final point, this important part of this project and acknowledged in many plans, that there's a lot of administrative capacity building that can occur, and ways in which there are tools in which the city can better create pathways, create ways in which city staff, the city itself can implement actions identified. So not plans, not projects, but those administrative structures to help implement resilience and sustainability. So if those were some of the themes that we recognized throughout the literature review and some of our focus groups, here are some of the gaps that we found. And these aren't meant to be kind of the specific line item gaps, but really kind of gaps, key themes of gaps, buckets of gaps, both in projects and plans, but also in procedures, that kind of administrative capacity thing. And that's my last bullet here. So I'm just going to go through these at a high level and give a few examples. There's an acknowledged gap in what we're calling comprehensive resilience planning, and that includes a number of things: specific vulnerability assessments, heat resilience, things that the city is actively working on now, but acknowledged through the literature review that those haven't happened. This concept of long-term adaptation, long-term resilience planning, some people refer to as retreat or managed retreat. How is that a part of Norwalk's sustainability and resilience planning? So thinking about this not in a short term, but also the long term. This next point, as I mentioned, greenhouse gas reduction. Again, the city's actively working on this now. There's the need to both inventory current emissions within the city, but also set goals for reduction and then implement those actions. Economic resilience. The business community of Norwalk is critical to the city and to the community. and how can resilience collaborate more? Some of the activities that the city's planning, how can that both recognize the impact of climate change and sustainability on businesses, but also engage businesses to support some of the city's goals? There are a lot of detailed infrastructures occurring or that have occurred, but there are probably some more that could be done focused on specific dependencies like stormwater utility or wastewater or drinking water. Emergency planning and response was something that came up in a number of the focus groups we had with city departments and partners, really paying attention to evacuation and access and egress, and making sure that there's capacity for those staff to deal with those issues. Integration across plans, partly being addressed by this plan, but also opportunities to think about transportation and transit in other plans in the city, thinking about how to integrate nature-based solutions and open space planning in other traditional planning avenues that the city has. So making sure that sustainability and resilience aren't left kind of on their own, but integrated across different plans. Again, a core part of this effort. And then this last point that I keep coming back to, what are the ways in which administrative capacity can be built, whether that be different staffing or training, enforcement of policies, coordination across different departments. So pause there. Building off this topic of gaps, wanted to ask you all, what are some of the top barriers that you think might exist for Norwalk taking action on climate change? And we'll ask that you select 3 of these. Again, no right answer, but we want to hear from you. If you had to give us, and these are 6 options, there are probably more. Please put thoughts in the Q&A if you have additional thoughts on that. We can talk about it at the end. Top barriers for Norwalk taking action on climate change. And I see people are filling this out. Great. I'm going to give a few more moments. See, we have a couple answers that are getting more response than others. Really appreciate that. But again, a lot of thought to a number of these different ones. So that's really good. Oftentimes there isn't a single way to implement sustainability and resilience, but there's also not a single barrier or kind of roadblock that's holding up progress. Excellent. All right, I'm going to close this one out. Thank you very much for those responses. So I just talked about some of the high-level elements of the phase 1 that we just went through, this literature review of all this great work that the city's done over the past decade plus, key gaps that we identified, and now I want to shift towards phase 2. I mentioned that we looked at 15 different plans, and there were over 200 actions listed, compiled from all of those plans. So what we tried to do was take those, we put it into a pretty thorough spreadsheet process, and spend some time understanding where are their similarities, where are their key focus. And we took the over 200 list and we honed it down to closer to 40. And those are going to be the core actions taken forward in phase 2 and built into the roadmap itself. And so these 10 categories, again, buckets, if you will, really summarize almost all of those honed in consolidated actions. So I'm just going to go through these just so everyone can hear them. Municipal staff coordination and capacity building, emergency management improvements, economic resilience, environmental justice, greenhouse gas inventory and reduction, public engagement and education, infrastructure resilience across key dependencies such as transportation and different utilities, stormwater management and funding, again, green infrastructure, open space, tree canopy, and living shorelines. And then this last point, regional, state, and local collaboration. So within this list of 10, you should see and hear many things that I brought up both in our key findings, but also in the gap analysis. So how can these be moved forward as a consolidated list of actions that the city and different departments can take hold of, and we can create streamlined actions for the city to move forward. All right, maybe our last poll. Which of the following to you is a top priority in Norwalk? Again, no right answer, but this just helps us understand what are some of the key passions or interests of participants. Please select 3, and I'll give a few moments. And again, part of this is to help you generate any other thoughts or questions you might have. Please put that in the Q&A box. Or just tee it up for yourself for conversation in a few moments when we get to the Q&A section. Excellent. See a lot of answers coming in. A few of these are rising to the top. Excellent. Why don't we wrap that up? That's great. Thanks everyone for participating. That's good to know, and we'll take that to heart. All right, so I'm going to transition now out, and we're about to pass the mic back to Brian. This just as a few words on next steps for the project. This is the kind of same schematic I showed at the beginning. The project's broken into different phases. We just wrapped up phase 1 and are moving fully into phase 2 with the consolidated list of actions. It's August now, amazing. This is just kind of a quick snapshot. The project started in January, February, so we're about halfway done, and we're really jumping into that next key part of building out the roadmap framework, have a draft roadmap by October. There will be a next public meeting towards the end of the project where we'll give some share out of where we've come and kind of what this all looks like, and final roadmap completed by the end of the year. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Brian, who's going to facilitate our question and answers. We keyed up a few additional questions in case you don't have any at the tip of your tongue that we wanted to give to you for further thought, further discussion. And I'll leave these on the screen, Brian, for a few minutes. And then on the next slide, before you wrap up, we have the link that people can get to.
All right, great. Thank you, John. That was great and very helpful. So I know there was a lot of information there in terms of what we're doing internally and also how that relates to the external facing meeting we're having tonight and sort of the input we're hoping to receive. You know, a lot of it, as we talked about, was focused on this municipal capacity building. It might be derived from some projects you've already been involved with, but I think it's always good to check in. I think that's sort of the theme of this meeting, and just, you know, maybe kick it off with the first question here. And the way we'll have to manage this, since it is a webinar, is if you could, I believe it's if you raise your hand, we could elevate you to be a speaker, just so we could kind of manage the inquiries here. But we definitely want to have an opportunity for everyone to have some say at this process at this point. Again, we're at the very initial stages. It may seem like a lot of work's done, but we're still at the point where we take in feedback and see how it could fold into our plan. So with that, let's see who we have here. We have Linnell Jones. Yeah, if you want to know, are you controlling the
Yeah.
Hey Linnell, how you doing?
Yes, Linnell, you should be able to.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And, you know, I'm very interested in what you say about municipal capacity building. And I wonder if SLR reviewed any of the city's annual stormwater management plans, which are required under our MS4 permit, and or any of the public comments made in response to the stormwater management plans. I know you say we've been on doing this for quite some time, and for many years we've had stormwater management plans. But I think if you look at them, they've never changed, and they were designed to be iterative, to get the public involved. And I live in a neighborhood where people still think it's a good idea to throw the dog poop in the storm drains. And when I suggested that, they told me that the plastic was biodegradable. And I'm like, no, I think it's the poop. And the poop ends up in my mailbox. And I know educating the public is one of the things that's important, but I think that if you look at our stormwater management plans and how that crosses different departments, it addresses exactly this: municipal capacity and educating the public. My neighborhood, in addition to having no pet waste policy, has no policy or even education about using fertilizers. And we're in a coastal flood zone. And my neighborhood believes that they didn't need to get permission because we're private property before filling tidal wetlands. And even though we run our own roads, I think we need a lot. We have a long way to go with education. And it shouldn't be who knows who when somebody complains about wetlands being filled. And I know that, you know, wetlands are addressed in not only, well, maybe not in our POCD, but today the head of the Western COG, which I learned means Council of Governments, explained to me that there's a Western POCD as well. And he pointed out, under protecting the Long Island Sound coast, that investments should have a life cycle cost analysis. So I will end it here and say, SLR, please explain to all of us what a life cycle cost analysis is. And basically, the POCD said it just considers the full range of cost and benefits, positive and negative, and long-term as well as short-term. But thank you. I thought this report was easy to read. I've tried to read the UTILE report more than once. I know it was one of the things that was provided to the SLR, and I would appreciate if SLR would comment on the UTILE report, because I think it's in direct contrast to what Circa is telling the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lynella. So I heard a few questions in there. So I think the first one, John or Noah, if you could just kind of provide a little bit of an update in terms of what we've reviewed in terms of the stormwater management plans, maybe as the start, and then we could go into the life cycle analysis question of the other one if you're able to. You might be on mute. I'm not sure who's trying to talk here.
Looks like John might be on mute, so I can I can take that question. We did not look at the annual stormwater management plans, but that's a great point. I think given the phase of the project so far, trying to kind of review and incorporate that in the same way we did the other plans might not make sense, but certainly taking a look at those, and during our municipal capacity building portion and the crosswalks that John mentioned, and also the overall plan roadmap, I think considering how to incorporate all of these findings and climate resilience and sustainability into the annual stormwater management plan, and making it really a living, updated document that will be important for implementation of these findings, I think is a great point, and that's really useful to think about. So thank you.
That's great. And I will take the next one, Brian, very briefly, but just to build off what Noah said, also stormwater management plan or planning and action came up a number of times, both in key themes, but also gaps identified. So as Noah said, that's great feedback. We appreciate it, and we'll consider it for next steps in the project. As I mentioned, we're working with a company called Caramita. They're a partner of ours, and they do sustainable planning for municipalities all over the country and world. And life cycle analysis is something that they're very focused on. And so we'll be thinking more about that as the project goes forward, and how that relates to different elements, both of sustainability and resilience, and different aspects of the city itself. So again, appreciate that comment.
Brian, it looks like we have two people with raised hands, but we also got a couple of questions, one in the Q&A that you just answered live, and just want to make sure, I mean, you just wrote the answer to. I want to make sure other attendees know, if you click on the Q&A box, you should be able to see the written answers to other questions. But But then we have a question in the chat: has the team considered either the new or previous transportation master plan? Which I can take.
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't believe we looked at a transportation master plan. We did look at a number of kind of more neighborhood specific transportation related plans, and I'm looking at my list right now and trying to remember, trying to see where this was, but we did look at a few different plans that related to transportation and public transit, and thinking about how that all ties in and can inform climate resilience as well. But again, another good example of a plan that is important to the city's development and future, and can incorporate all of these different resilience and sustainability concepts and findings from previous documents, so that moving forward, it is able to make the city more resilient and sustainable.
Yeah, that's the kind of feedback we need. So much appreciated tonight. So I think Elsa, are you, did I answer your question, or would you like to still pose one to the group? We could elevate you if you would like.
Sure. Yeah, so I really would like to advocate for drinking water planning. We have aging infrastructure. We have water that's, of course, my phone has to ring right now, getting lost. Water that's getting lost because of aging infrastructure. And we have expanding population, but we have a finite supply of water. So, you know, when I see things like, oh, we're planning, you know, $50 million to enhance our parks, and like, oh, that's really nice, but we have to go begging for like $5 million for water capital projects.
Great, thank you, Elsa, and we'll definitely be, continuing the discussion as part of this work.
Thank you.
Tanner, how you doing? We'll elevate you, and you could respond to that question.
Yeah. Am I online? Am I live?
On, we gotcha.
All right. Yeah. So the slide's gone, but there were a couple questions on that slide I wanted to respond to. One of the things that I feel like was done really well was the transportation master plan. I wanted to call that out, and especially after hearing that maybe it hasn't been considered as much as it needs to be, I especially want to call it out. One of the goals that was set in the draft transportation master plan was that Norwalk would be a 15-minute city, accessible via walking, biking, and public transit. And I want to call that out as a particularly, it's an aggressive goal, but it's a very visionary goal, and one that relates directly to sustainability and also to resiliency. I think the ways it relates to sustainability are quite clear, in that we can reduce our reliance on cars, especially gas-powered cars. But also the resiliency piece of that, I think, gets overlooked. There's resiliency to economic fluctuations, especially with the price of gas. We just saw that last year, where the price of gas spiked so much that the Connecticut state legislature intervened and cut the gas tax and made public transit free. The more that we can decrease our reliance on especially gas-powered cars, the more that we can be resilient to economic fluctuations like that. And then there's also the resiliency to things like power outages that cause stoplights to go out. So I wanted to highlight the transportation master plan as being very forward-thinking in that respect, but then also an area that I see a gap, despite the great work that has been done with the transportation master plan. I feel like there's a lot of plans that are being made, long-term plans, kind of. I think it's cascading from the POCD a few years ago. We have the zoning rewrite that's happening. We have the transportation master plan. We have the parks master plan. We have an affordable housing project that's starting soon. All this stuff is great, but I feel like it is happening in silos, and I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I want to call particular attention to the need for integration between land use planning and transportation planning, because those two things are so integrated. Basically, the way the demand we have for transportation follows directly from where people live and where people want to go, and that's land use planning, right? And I think it's good. We're off to a good start by having the Department of TMP, Transportation, Mobility, and Parking, under the same chief as Planning and Zoning, under the Chief of Economic and Community Development. But I still do feel like there could be greater, especially long-term vision that's maybe more granular than the POCD in terms of land use planning integrated with transportation planning. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Tanner. And I think that's one of one of my biggest hopes as part of this project, and what we discuss often, as you mentioned, working with Jess and Jim Travers and trying to really enhance that integration between land use and transportation planning, and the work that SLR is doing as part of this. Really trying to kind of identify these long-term plans and find what they refer to as a crosswalk. But I think what that effectively is referring to is the ability to break through some of these silos and get people all speaking on the same, speaking the same language, because fully recognizing exactly what you talked about in terms of the land use and transportation cycle, where we have, the infrastructure investments, whatever they be, they're, stormwater, or if we talk about from transportation perspective, they obviously increase accessibility to certain areas, which influence activity patterns, and then that's a feedback loop. So what we want to try to do is insert sustainability at each intersection along that feedback loop, so that everyone is, working in a goal-oriented fashion, recognizing how they fit into the overall vision of sustainability. So I think that's exactly why, to your specific point, why we made a strategic decision to focus this plan on municipal capacity building and trying to implement these things and figuring out what the organizational structure should be in order to do so. So your comment is well heard and a huge part of this project. Who else do we have? Any other specific questions? I was interested. I know that Tanner and some of you mentioned, the transportation master plan and the success of that. Looking at what other successes you may see as one possible theme, but I did just see a hand pop up and it went away. So I don't know what happened there.
Brian, I'll also put I'll share the screen again, just to put those questions back up.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. Sorry if I missed you. I saw someone come in and they might have got bounced, but anyone else, if you're interested, these are kind of sort of prompt questions. Don't feel limited by it, but we just want to, see if there's any information here. This is stuff that will be helpful to us as well. So if there's anything that resonates with you, feel free to raise your hand. Oh, Linnell, hey, how you doing? We could elevate you again.
Thank you. I just want to say, I appreciate what you're saying about the bikes, but when the flood comes, the bike's going to be no good. And I know it doesn't affect everybody, but for those of us that flooding does affect, it's very serious. And not only do I think Circa came to the conclusion, but SLR will too. And that whole Western COG POCD said, don't increase density in known flood zones, particularly without evacuation routes. And we don't have the funding. We're not prepared to raise our roads 3 feet. Where I live, we get washed out. Again, my neighbors are clueless that they live in a flood zone. And it was years ago that we fought to save the inland wetlands. Yes, I know floods recede, but you got to be able to have emergency vehicles. And I read the Norwalk hazard plan. They mentioned Water Street probably about 5 times. And why would we be looking to increase density right where it makes no sense? I mean, the flood zone, I know we need more apartments. Can't we put them at the other side? And I know flooding doesn't affect everybody, but it does affect people by the river. And what happened when those rains came down in Vermont and New Hampshire, roads washed out, houses washed out. And those people all got out with their plows and did the roads themselves. That's not going to happen here in Norwalk. And I know flooding doesn't affect everybody and biking's good, but we've got a plan for the water rises that they're telling us. And we see these storms are tough. So that's why stormwater is so important. Thank you.
Thanks, Linnell. Yeah, just a quick response. I mean, I know you were involved in some of the discussions, at the outcome stage of the work we do with the Nature Conservancy. I actually, you mentioned WestCog. I actually was the executive director over at MetroCog for about 8 years, and I was there for Hurricane Sandy. So I'm very well in tune with what you're talking about, and it's very real. So I appreciate your comment there. One of the things, obviously, we're trying to make sure that we're feeding into this plan was the connection of the sort of climate change sea level rise mapping to look at vulnerable areas, both in terms of for social impact, but also development impact, and trying to be strategic in terms of how we design. So your comment is well heard and appreciated. Is there someone else that's raising their hand?
John Pinto has been trying to raise his hand.
Hey, John, how you doing?
Yes, Brian, thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate as I understanding what the resiliency program is all about. And as I understand, the purpose of a resiliency plan is to accelerate recovery time after a flood or an extreme event, number one, and two, to reduce the vulnerability of the existing condition. But if you look at the waterfront development plan in Norwalk on Water Street, they try to expand the existing conditions and add to the vulnerability in an area that has a floodplain of a 10 out of 10, it's 10. So I hope you plan to try to address that point of expanding in an area that is has an increased vulnerability as it is.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, and I think part of this is obviously we're looking at the intersectionality of plans, right? So we're kind of working forward on the sustainability front. We're going to have a number of recommendations that come up, and then discussions that need to occur in terms of priorities, focus, and how those all balance out. I always make the joke in the business of city planning or development, I feel like I'm playing a game of whack-a-mole sometimes, whereby, as we solve for one problem and another pops up. So it's really just about reconciling that balance within the context of obviously what's a clear value for the community, sustainability. So thank you for the comment. Anyone else have any specific questions here or any other comments that you'd like to make as part of this discussion?
Brian, we also got a new question in the Q&A.
Okay, let's see.
Besides our current open spaces and parks, has the city identified any other areas to preserve and or add to our open green space?
Yeah, and that's a big part of the POCD in terms of balancing that, as well as the new parks master plan. So it's not specifically as part of this, other than we are looking at it to make sure it's obviously consistent with our recommendations. But the answer is yes. It's just as not specifically as part of this particular engagement. Any other questions, comments, feedback? This is all, and I just want you all to know, this is all very helpful. SLR has been working very diligently and hard, and not necessarily, we've been coordinating with each other across partners. We obviously carry forward everything we've heard from past plans and public feedback, but the more perspective we could get, the better, because it helps us, to focus on what specific areas of importance. I think we have one other hand come up. Diane, you're welcome to, we'll elevate you here.
Hi, sorry, I joined late. I was on another call, but it seems to me that some of the important goals for resilience, like more open space and less heat islands in South Norwalk, are underfunded, notoriously underfunded. And I'm wondering if there are sources of revenue contemplated to meet the needs for the way things are going to need to be in the future. For example, having more cooling centers for people to go to, should there be a heat wave at a time when there are power outages, and more solar on public buildings, so that even if the power grid goes out, there's still an ability to keep people cool with heat pumps and solar?
Yeah, no, great question. So one of the things that I envision coming out of this, and kind of as a strategic focus of this plan, to your first question, in terms of what other funding that we'd be looking for, is to establish almost a grant pipeline. Once we develop these priorities, which have come from different plans, but we've reworked them or reassessed them, making sure that each department is aware of what others need as well. So when these grant opportunities come available, there's interaction between the departments, and that we could go pursue different resources, additional resources outside of local resources. And that's kind of a key theme of my career and a key focus of the redevelopment agency, trying to attract state and federal resources, because these are big problems, and they require funding, and it can't be all shouldered by one level of government. So that is, to your first question, yes, that is a key point. And then just expanding a little further on the concept of why municipal capacity building is really just focused on having cross-departmental goals, so that we're all moving in a similar direction to optimize the resources that we do have. So yes, it's a very good point.
Ryan, I'm going to scroll to the next slides. Just no rush, but just so everyone has a moment to see the link.
Great. Yeah, please do. Thanks. Yeah, and what John's showing here, I don't know if you had anything specific to say, John, but it just we set up a specific plan page for this project with the ability to insert comments. You know, we're hitting you with a lot of information today, and maybe, you know, things come up after this session. Please feel free to go there. I'm monitoring that along with Katie O'Leary from our office, and we try to be as responsive as we can in that regard. I think one of the things that I've so encouraged by this public outreach meeting too is, and I'm trying to take a lot of our projects and just start early and start the engagement early and often, and have an element of transparency where we can talk out these things, because it's super helpful for us, rather than us trying to create a plan in a vacuum. So please reach out, please let us know, and we look forward to hearing from you. Is there anything else that tonight? Is there any specific questions? And again, this meeting will be recorded, just so you all know. So it's up, it'll be up on the website as well, if you want to share it with your friends and all your family as a nice gift for their summer. Oh, we got a hand. Tanner Thompson, welcome back to the party.
Thanks, Brian. I wanted to make one more comment more specifically about TMP. I didn't introduce myself when I spoke first. I'm the chair of the city's Bike Walk Commission. And so I interact with TMP a lot, and I work with them. And in the past year, the past couple of years, I think that TMP has had a lot of wins. I want to call out one in particular that speaks to this like administrative capacity issue, and that is just by example that TMP secured a considerable amount of money in the city budget for an on-call concrete contract that allows them to fix small sidewalk issues as they see them, instead of having to put each little tiny project out to bid, which streamlines the project quite a bit. And I would love to see more stuff like that happen, because the other side of the coin is that so often when I interact with TMP and I follow up with them about a project, or I talk to them about something that could be done in the space of biking and walking, the response that I get is just that they're slammed, that they have so much on their plate and they would love to do all these things, but they can't, because they are just doing the bare minimum requires all the staff that they have. I'm sure that's not entirely new, but I did want to call that out specifically because I work with them specifically.
Great, thanks, Tanner. Anything else from the group? And just so everyone knows, there's a question here in terms of the where are the notifications for this meeting. So this isn't a typical committee meeting, so there might be that's typically where some people may go to get notices for these things, but make sure you go to the project webpage. It's linked on the city website. It was on the city's website for a while, but the best source for information just moving forward so that you don't miss anything is the link up here, just so you know.
And Brian, Noah has put that in the chat as well.
Great, thank you. Let's see, sorry, we got a couple questions that came in here. I'm just taking a second to digest them. Not so involved with the 15-minute plan, but if you reach out, we could help you connect you to who could best answer that. What about food sources? Yeah, so food source separation and composting, that's something we'll just take that in, and we'll see integrated as part of our discussion. Would appreciate the feedback. All right, great. Well, really appreciate. Oh, wait, we got Tanner. Oh no, sorry, it was a different mic. You're good. Really appreciate everyone's participation tonight. Again, did you have anything, John? Sorry, I wasn't sure if you had any.
Just that we got one more for you.
Oh, okay, where is it? Sorry.
Oh, it's in the Q&A. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I just made it. Yeah, I got multiple windows here.
There's a similar question in the chat and the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how can we be part of a future discussion? So yeah, so all notifications in terms of additional discussions are going to be available on the plan. This work is also going to be presented and elevated to the Ad Hoc Sustainability and Resilience Committee. So I think stay tuned on both those. The resources for that are actually on the city's agenda website. There is a link to this, but the plan itself is going to be housed here. We'll work on connecting them a little bit further to make it more clear moving forward. But I think those are going to be the two main forums to help being part of this, and we'll be sure to send out information as it becomes available. All right, very good. Well, thank you for joining us on this lovely evening. I think if you can make it outside, it's beautiful. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer, and we look forward to hearing from you as this project moves forward. Take care, everyone.